Hello again, Thumbs here. I wanted to share with you a conversation I had with Jeff, who has been an incredible mentor of mine recently in making wigwams. He's an experienced naturalist in so many different mediums with cordage and basket weaving and natural building, but I've been really lucky most recently to be learning how to take completely untouched forest and turn it into these traditional shelters known as wigwams. And he is also going to be teaching his first complete wigwam building course at Cambia Community. I feel so lucky to be hosting him for this course at the last weekend of June in 2019. And so if you follow the links below this video, you'll see both for that course, but the information we're covering is quite universal. So if you click on his website, which there'll also be a link for below, you can find out about other courses he's doing, and I'll share other links there for in case you see this after June 2019 and you still want to learn from Jeff. We'll have some active links at the bottom of the video. But I just have so much gratitude for all Jeff has already taught me, and feel so lucky to have the opportunity for him to share his wisdom with y'all. So please enjoy, and hopefully see you at the end of this month.
Well, this is Jeff Gottlieb, and we're doing this little thing to tell people about wigwam building, because I've been doing this for a long time. And I've built 63 primitive houses of different sizes and types. And so I'm interested in sharing that knowledge, because I won't be doing it forever. I turned 61 this year. So I've got oodles of experience and a little less strength every year, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I've been lucky to work with you, and I still feel like I'm trying to catch up with as much endurance and strength as you have. So there's some bell curve where I'm still feel like I'm trying to catch up with you. So you have a ways to go before you slow down.
It's all about the efficiency that comes with practice.
Yeah, I think it's also the calm, because you've done it so many times. You have a certain just knowing all the variables that might happen. But sometimes when it's my early times, I'm just got my so much anxiety around what to do next. I don't have that. It burns up calories in the way you just hold such a peaceful.
It does. But I burn up a lot of calories in a day. And, and I have to say that even though I've done all this many of these things, I am still flying by the seat of my pants, because these are custom buildings, no or like. There's no pipeline of material, and there's no steady helper or partner or team. Anytime I have a team, it's amazing what we get done. But then, I allocate my time differently if I have a team or if I'm doing it by myself. So I really have to reinvent the wheel every time.
So what first got you into making these? Why do you feel called to take on something so complicated?
Well, I mean, as a kid, I was a naturalist. I was always interested in plants and animals and where they live and how they live there and what they're going to do and what they eat and what eats them. And that led me to think about people and how we fit in, what we get as resources and what we, give as living things, and how are we working the systems that we're working. And the answer was, well, usually inefficiently, barking up the wrong tree, wasting a lot of stuff, thinking that the earth is inexhaustible and all those things. And so I wondered, how could you do it differently? So I started looking at things people did historically and things that people might do now. So like wilderness survival kind of stuff. Like, what would I do if I were out in a natural area? How would I take care of myself? How would I get something to eat? So in learning about that, I really saw that I needed to learn about what the people did who were good at living in the place that you're wondering about. So that's going to get you into history and anthropology and cultural studies and art, and what did people do and how did they do it, and who were they and why did they do it that way. And so with that, I started to get requests from organizations to do educational programs and to make things that they could use in their educational programs, props and materials. And I was working at a nature center, and somebody came and built a thatch wigwam, nice big one. And I looked at that and I said, I could do that. Let me see how. So I went to a nature center that I was friendly with and said, how would y'all like a wigwam? Cheap. And they said, yeah, we do. And I said, okay, good. You all will have to supply the grunt work. And I just want a little bit of money to make it so that I'm, not going to starve while I'm building a wigwam. So I invented wigwam building with some notes from people who had built some things before and some words of advice. And I figured it out. And then an old friend of mine was doing pretty much the same thing at the same time. And we started to collaborate. And he's built as many as I have. And almost no overlap. All different ones. So I figured it out. And every time I had the puzzle of, where am I going to get that many cedars of the right size? Where am I going to get the bark slabs? I've got to get permission to cut the tree. Never mind if I know the technique or not. I need to know who's going to let me cut a tree and peel the bark. And is it because they've already cut it and they're going to let me peel the bark? Or do they need a place cleared? It was brand new every time. 63 times. And that started in 1988. That's when I built my first one. So that's how I started doing it. And that's why it's still not routine.
Have you spent some time in living in one of them for any of the shelters you've made, whether it's a wigwam or another one? Have you spent any extended amounts of time camping or residing in them?
Yeah, camping short term, just because my idea of camping is, how am I going to sleep? Because I'm busy doing something and I'm somewhere. So it doesn't matter that much to me if I'm in my car or I'm in a wigwam or I'm under a bush. It doesn't matter. As long as nothing's poking me in the back and I can sleep, because I need to rest because I got a lot to do. So yeah, I've slept in them and they've been really cozy. I've slept in them at 20 degrees with a fire going, and that's unique and really comforting and really interesting. You get a whole new set of questions that arise and problems to solve if you're dealing with, well, what's the heat doing? And what's the smoke doing? And how high off the ground is the most comfortable place circulation wise? And, is the ground cold? The ground wet? Do I want a mat? Do I want a bench? Do I want, So I figured it out new every time and tried them out a lot. The thing that's been really gratifying is when friends of mine take my book on building wigwams and go out in the woods and build themselves one and then live in it for 2 years, which some people have. And that was really great because they came back to me and they were telling me, what they found useful and what they could have used more description about and all that stuff. That was really fun, especially because they didn't really have too many criticisms. What I had in the book worked. So that's pretty fun. So yeah, when I had built about 15 wigwams, I started to, internet was an up and coming thing at that point. So I said, well, why don't I look up what people have written about this subject? And the answer was, back then, if you looked up wigwam, you either got the wig company or the sock company. Or you got simple line drawings that didn't really explain too much. And so I said, okay, I guess I have to write it. So I took a lot of pictures and I got pictures other people had done. And my friend Barry, who I'd collaborated with so many times, he did the illustrations for it. And it took me a couple of years and I wrote the book. I edited it myself. I had a couple of people proofread it. I had some technical advice from the reference librarian and the library on, how to use the computer to do it. And then I just took it to a printer and had it printed. And that's thousands of copies ago.
That's great. I do love the book. It's definitely a resource for me as I prep for the class that we have coming up. Before I get into what we'd be learning, I was wondering if you could share just the history, why are we making these structures? You said, these structures have some history in this land. Can you tell me more about the history of wigwams on this coast?
Sure. Yeah, they were made by people from about Piedmont, North Carolina to southern Canada with only minor variations. Maybe the species of tree that yielded the bark, maybe whether the thing was a round dome or a long, narrow dome sort of thing. But pretty much the frames looked alike, and a knot that you learn to do one sort of frame would absolutely be perfectly good to do the other sort of frame. So they had a lot in common. It had more in common, the exact shape had more in common with how many people were supposed to live in them. Like the tremendous longhouses that the Iroquois lived in were all because the whole clan lived in the same longhouse. And you had little partitions where your nuclear family lived. So it was those folks, a number of related tribes, especially Algonquin-speaking people.
The difference between the wigwam and the longhouse is basically the shape, or what are the main differences?
Frame shape, total length,
Mm-hmm.
and just general size.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a number of groups where almost all the families lived in round wigwams, but there was one long one that was kind of a community building, maybe the chief's house, and it was his job to entertain, have meetings, that sort of thing. So they certainly knew how to do both, but their culture had them doing this shape for this purpose and that shape for that purpose.
And I know they were often built by cultures who had a large range and migrated along extensive watersheds and stuff, but the structures themselves, did they travel with the people, the indigenous, like the Algonquin, or were they more stationary?
No, the structures were stationary. The one thing that you could do if let's say you had a large territory and resources were available at different seasons, you might cover your wigwam with mats instead of with bark slabs. And then when you want to go to a new place, you just build a new frame and carry the mats. So that was temporary. But mostly these folks were sedentary farmers, gardeners, and they lived in pretty large towns, and the houses didn't move. They were expecting to live in them for 5 to 10 years at least. And then that didn't mean they had to move. That just meant they'd have to build another one. So yeah, this is not like a teepee where we got to follow the buffalo or that sort of thing.
Right.
This is, home sweet home for as long as we want to be here.
Yeah. Have you found that first, I'd love to hear what kind of skills it takes on the more detailed level of how to build one, like kind of the skill set, and then if there's applications for those same skills in other craft that you've done.
Oh, sure. Well, the skills have to do with fastening, and they didn't have screws, and they didn't have nails, and they didn't have that sort of glue. So it was all about tying things together. And so a lot of knots would work, but I have favorite knots that I think look good and are economical of materials and are very strong. So you'd have to know your knots and know when to use which knot for what purpose, and then being able to cut through the bark on a really large fresh log and peel sheets of bark off without tearing them, which you think it's pretty simple because the bark's not stuck to the trunk, and it isn't. Then you just gotta get under it. But it's very easy to accidentally split it, tear it, wreck it, and you need those pieces as perfect as you can get them, because every crack is a place rain can get in. So, there's a whole skill around peeling bark off trees and about harvesting the tying materials, which come from small trees of certain species, and they have to be handled so that they don't spoil, and they are moist, and they can be, they'll hold good knots. So, and the other thing is finding the right saplings, because they're going to be made out of, the frames are made out of long, slender individuals that grew in a crowd, a species that won't rot when you stick it in the ground, a species that when crowded grows tall and narrow with with no side branches, or those side branches die. So you got to know your plants, and you have to know how they grow and when they grow under those conditions. And you have to know what's the best time of year to get them, get parts of them or collect them. And then you have to know how to build. And you would think that that would be a very specialized sort of thing, like people aren't living in bark houses. But in the Southeast here, people use bark shingles, and they're beautiful. And they're very expensive because not that many people know how to do it, and they charge a lot of money for bark shingles. So you will see really fancy houses that, not the roof shingles, but under an overhang where they won't get wet all the time. Bark shingles are beautiful. I did it on my little house I built. And I also see techniques that I'm using being done by natural builders of many, many kinds. Like, I know how to do a thatch roof because I'm doing thatching on wigwams. You got to get it right or it's going to leak. And when it leaks, it's going to rot. So you have to understand what does water do with fibrous materials held, either straight or around a curve. So yeah, I've used, actually, I learned about wigwams before I learned about natural building, other kinds of natural building. And when I took a workshop in it, I realized, hey, that's a useful skill. That's a skill that carries. I could, what I know about thatching will help me. What I know about lashing will help me. What I know about wood will help me. And then when I did my own, hay bale building with clay plaster and timbers that I cut myself, I used a lot of things that I learned about wigwam building. So it does carry. And people that are doing research into natural buildings, they are looking for ways to get sustainable materials, to have a smaller carbon footprint, to have everything cost less, to have the ability to do it yourself and not have to rely on outside supply. Yeah, all those things, and they all interrelate. So learning about ancient traditional structures could help you right now.
As far as the tools needed, I do a lot of construction. It seems like everyone's using power tools for basically everything. Like, the more electricity we can use, the better. Is almost feels like the norm. And I'm just wondering what kind of tools you've built these things with, both in the traditional techniques and what tools you currently use.
Okay. Well, I've done it a bunch of different ways at different levels of technology. I have worked with power tools. And the first power tool is my vehicle. Just think about that. That's a tool. It's going to get your materials to where you're going to build it. It's going to get you there. It's going to, be able to drag things or haul things or push things or whatever. So that's one. And I don't know how to get away from that one because I'm not building all of these in my own yard. And I'm not going to a place where everything I need is right there. I have, and that's great when you don't have to go to this state to get this material and that state to get that material. So other power tools would be, if I have to get bark off a large log, I probably have to cut down a tree. And I don't have all week, so I'm doing it with a chainsaw. But I have peeled logs where the trees fell over by themselves, which they do. Some trees have shallow root systems and they fall over. And I have done that with steel hand tools, hatchets and machetes and axes and wedges and saws and things like that. So I've gotten away from using fossil fuels and electricity, and that works fine, just takes more time. And if you have the time, let's say you want to teach people how to do it, great, do it. And the bigger your team is, if they know what they're doing, the easier it is to work together to get it all done. And I have also tried out, not to do a whole lot of it, but I've tried out cutting down saplings with a stone axe, cutting through giant tree bark to peel off big sheets with wooden wedges that fit under there, or strips of bark that produce wedges. So there are lots of tools that you can approximate with natural materials made with stone tools, and I've played with them. Aside from taking more time and being harder to work with, they all work. Obviously, they worked because people did them for thousands of years. So it's a crazy disconnected question people ask. It's like, put hands on hips and say, do stone tools really work? No, we've just been making them for 2.5 million years to wonder if maybe they'll work next time, or because they're fun. It's like, no, of course they work. So that's a backwards lack of logic people are employing.
Do you have any stone tools that you bring to the worksite still to show, or are those kept somewhere else?
Sometimes, but you have to also think about, like, what's a Stone Age tool? Like, it is just as primitive to take a stone axe and split a piece of wood and grind a wedge-shaped edge on it and use the split piece of wood to peel bark. It's not a stone tool, but it's a Stone Age tool. So bone tools, antler tools, stone tools, seashell tools, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do bring them. And one of the reasons is because a lot of times when I build them, I'm building them for educational organizations, and they want to learn how to interpret their own exhibit. So at one of the last places, one of the places that you helped me at Irvine Nature Center, they wanted the log that I cut to have a stone-topped look to it. So I made them a stone axe and I gave it to them. They have not used it yet. They should have used it when the tree was green, but they didn't. So it'll just be 5 times as hard. But anyway, I brought it, they have it. So they get to interpret it. They get to show it and say, this is what a tool would look like if you were, this is the style of tool people made in that area. These are materials they would have had, and this is the tool. This will cut through bark. This will cut down a tree. This will split a log. This will chop saplings to the right length, and they work.
So in prep for the class, my next step is I need to harvest a bunch of lashing, and I have a beautiful pawpaw grove I found out in the woods here, and I was wondering about the steps for taking it from pawpaw, choosing which size tree, and then how to take out the inner bark for the lashing.
Okay. Well, pawpaw is different than some other trees because generally when you see a stand of pawpaw, it's a clone. It's all one individual root system, all the same genetic material. So go ahead and thin the grove out. Unless you've taken all of it, you haven't killed the tree. So you can utilize whatever size suits your purposes. And it'll just continue to feed itself and spring back. They don't grow real fast. But what I'm always looking for is a tree, a young tree. I don't want it to have heavy bark. With pawpaw, you don't have to worry about that. It's always thin and pliable, even if it's like one of the biggest pawpaws around. So they're all thin and they're all pliable and they all have easy bark to peel off. So you're going to cut it. You're going to look for one that doesn't have horizontal branches coming out for as long as you can get it. Because every time you have a knot, that's a place where fibers they discontinue because they were going out the branch. And then you cut it and you make couple of longitudinal slits in the bark, start peeling under it, and start pulling it away from the trunk. But don't pull it all the way, because as you pull, it's going to get narrower and narrower and narrower because there's friction at the sides, and it's going to tear fibers away, and the strip's going to get narrower. So keep that from happening. When it starts to look like that's happening, peel the one next to it, because that one just got wider because some of the fibers are stuck to it. So you peel that one for a ways, past where you stopped last time, and when it starts to get narrow, peel the one after that until you're like peeling a banana with all the different ones, and you work your way all the way down. For simplicity's sake, you can cut the sections of the trunk into 6-foot pieces, because a 6-foot length is exactly the right length to do a lashing. So if you peel yourself approximately inch wide strips, 6 feet long, great. Then later on, you could, if you want, get in between the outer bark and the inner bark, maybe with a knife, just start it and begin to peel them away from each other with your hands. You know, you grip one, you grip the other, you start to separate your hands and use your knuckles to control the rest of it. And you can just get rid of the outer bark, which doesn't have a lot of strength and doesn't make not tying very easy. So, and then you just coil the strips up loosely, maybe a size that will fit in a water container, and get them as dry as you can, as fast as you can. Let's get modern. Put them on the dashboard of your car in the sun. They'll dry the fastest they possibly can. I call it the dashboard kiln.
Dashboard kiln, I love it. And all naturalists I know have a bit of a nature center created
Yes,
on their dash. So.
That's because it mummifies things you put up there.
Uh-huh.
I had a little road-killed snake up on my dashboard for 3 years until I got a new dashboard. It didn't rot, it didn't spoil, it didn't change at all. It was amazing.
And now I know you're the real deal. That's the official. That's
You
3.
could make jerky up there.
Really?
Yeah.
That's perfect. It would smell good too, being on top of the air conditioning there, all the fresh.
And you can dry medicinal herbs. You could dry sage and, you know, any kind of things up there. Make your car smell really good.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes here to describe all the stuff you'll be teaching. And I just want to say that I just feel so lucky and so grateful to, to get to have such incredible wealth of knowledge to get to ask all these questions, because I know you kind of had to hodgepodge and experiment and figure it out, and I just get to be the lucky next generation to carry the torch. So thank you for passing it on.
Well, I am so grateful that you're braving all of this technology on my behalf, because if I had to do it, I would throw up my hands and say, I don't know. And I appreciate your willingness to help on projects in order to learn the ropes yourself, kind of literally and figuratively learn the ropes. And it's been a great delight collaborating on this upcoming workshop with you. I can't wait to come and do it.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, and keep in touch, and I'll get to see you in the near future.
Yeah, coming right up, a couple of weeks.
Looking forward to it.
Right. Be well, and I hope lots of people get to see this.
Yes.
And and I hope it generates questions, and they realize, hey, I want to know more about that, and they come to the workshop.
Mm-hmm.